promotes not just healthier digestion, but again, we want to harness the power of the gut as a defensive organ also. So I'm going to share just 3 studies with you that I always share because I think these 3 studies from a gut health point of view are so important. The first is from 2010, and interestingly, I first came across the study in The Economist, not in our medical journal, with my dad's issue of The Economist. I read about this study. So Paolo Leonetti is an Italian pediatric gastroenterologist. And in 2010, he set out to study the microbiome in 2 groups of children. In a group of children in Florence, Italy, who were eating very similar to diet to what kids in the US eat. So a lot of sugar, a lot of fat, a lot of processed carbohydrates. And he compared that diet to a group of children in Volpan, Burkina Faso, who were living very much like their Neolithic ancestors lived, who were eating primarily plants that were grown nearby. They ate occasional termites in the rainy season for animal protein, and occasional little bit of chicken. And what he found, and these kids were from the Mossi ethnic tribe, who again were living in these rondavels, in these huts. The animals live in the huts with them, so they're exposed to a lot of soil microbes through their environment, through the animals. They eat a very high fiber, locally grown diet. What he found is that babies who were born vaginally and who were breastfed were virtually identical in the 2 areas, in Florence and in Burkina Faso. No difference. But as soon as the kids graduated to table food, to the indigenous diet that people were eating, everything changed. So again, the Italian kids, gelato, pizza, ossobuco, pasta. The kids in Volpan, Burkina Faso, millet, sorghum, vegetables, and again, everything locally grown. And what kinds of differences were we seeing in the microbiome? The kids in Burkina Faso had double the levels of short-chain fatty acids, which are a marker of gut health. They had microbial species that were associated with leanness. The kids in Italy had low levels of short-chain fatty acids, and they had species that were associated with obesity and diarrheal illness. Now, the really fascinating thing about this study is that neither group of kids were sick. These were healthy toddlers, but we were already seeing the foundation for disease being laid down in these 2 groups. So you might look at this study and say, well, that's very interesting, but maybe it was the environment, maybe it wasn't the food, maybe it was the fact that they were living with the animals and out in nature, and that was responsible for the differences. This is another one of our important studies from the journal Nature, and this study, again, it's almost 10 years old. Researchers at Harvard took 2 groups of people, 9 volunteers, and again, these were the same people living in the same environment. They put them on an Atkins-type diet, pork rinds and prosciutto, for about a week. Then they rested them, and then they put them on a plant-based diet, jasmine rice, lentils, mango for snack instead of pork rinds. And they looked at the microbiome before, during, and after. And they found that within about 30 hours of food hitting the gut, the microbiome started to change dramatically. The biggest change was the bilophila, the bile-loving bacteria, dropped. And the bilophila are very involved in metabolizing animal protein. So when you start eating less animal protein, those numbers will drop. The Faecalibacterium prosnitzii, my friend at prosnitzii, was increased. But what was also really surprising was they saw the different genes being activated, turned on and off as a result of the microbial change. So for me as a gastroenterologist, this is an incredible message of optimism. I may not be able to change what you got genetically if you got dealt a bad hand, but 30 hours from today, from making a dietary change, you can start to see movement in the microbiome that's going to influence all those diseases we talked about. Your heart and your lungs and your brain and your kidneys and your musculoskeletal system, etc. And the really interesting thing about these studies, we'll go on to the 3rd one, is that it doesn't matter what you call yourself. You don't have to be a vegan or a vegetarian or a lacto-ovarian vegetarian or a flexitarian. You just have to eat more plants. And how do we know that eating plants is so important? We know it from the American Gut Project study from 2018. This is Rob Knight. Remember the name because I'm quite sure he's going to win a Nobel Prize for his work on the microbiome. So this is a nonprofit that he and several other researchers lead. And this is the largest human microbiome dietary project ever done. 10,000 people from over 40 different countries looking at what are the factors that create a healthy microbiome. A microbiome that's diverse diverse and robust, where you have a wide variety of species all producing these important metabolites. And they found that, again, it wasn't whether you were vegan or what you called yourself, it was simply the number of different plants you ate per week. And the magic number was 30. And 30 might sound like a lot, but remember, you get credit for fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, herbs, grains, spices. So think about what you can do with a cup of oatmeal. You could use some almond milk, the oats, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, blueberries, raisins, a little shaved coconut, a dash of maple syrup. You get credit for the maple syrup. You are at 8. Salad, lettuce, cucumber, carrots, maybe some Brussels sprouts, chickpeas, 5. Or up to 12 in a day. You only need to do 30 in a week. And again, throw some basil into your salad. Parsley, you get credit for all of it. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, whole grains, nuts, herbs, and seeds, and spices. So one of the most important things you can do is pay attention to the number of different plant foods you're eating in a week. If you have kids, make a little chart with 30. Every time they eat a different plant, they get a little tick, get a gold star at the end of the week, because it's a diversity of plants that's so important. I have vegan patients who only eat 4 or 5 different plants a week. They have peas, carrots, broccoli in heavy rotation, and that's it. And so the diversity of plants is the #1 factor for building a diverse microbiome. It's not probiotics or prebiotics or anything else that you find at the store. It's those choices that we make about what we eat on a daily basis. Okay. Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. Come back to this, most prevalent bacteria in plant eaters. Now I want to connect F. prausnitzii to that gut immune system, what's going on there. So we're going to bring it all together. Okay, gut lining. You see the yellow gut lining there. Fiber. Fiber is prebiotic food, meaning it is food to feed our biota, our bacteria. The bacteria themselves are the probiotics. They are the living organisms, whether they're outside and we're ingesting them or they're already in our body. And then finally, the short-chain fatty acids are the postbiotics. So we have pre-fiber, pro-bacteria, and postbiotics, the short-chain fatty acids. And when you're eating high levels of prebiotic food, not supplements, the fiber, the bacteria metabolize them, and you end up with high levels of these short-chain fatty acids. And high levels of these short-chain fatty acids are correlated with an anti-inflammatory response. No ARDS, no autoimmune disease, no immune dysregulation. So that's how it works. I wish I could make it sexier than eat more plants, but at the end of the day, that's a big part of it. So when I talk to patients about maintaining gut health, which these days I have to include with that, how do you really take advantage of your gut as a defensive organism too? And the reason that is so important is, and I really try to not scare people when I talk about this stuff, but I want to talk about what we know as clinicians and scientists and what is real. What's real is that in the time we have 30 new viruses for which we have no treatment. HIV, Ebola, SARS-CoV-2, MERS, and others. A 2021 study from Duke University did a mathematical analysis to estimate the likelihood of a pandemic like COVID-19 happening. And what they found was that the likelihood of something like that happening was 2% per year. Which means for my daughter born in 2005, by the time this happened in 2020, there was already a 30% likelihood that it was going to happen. It felt like it fell out of the sky, but this was actually something that they were able to predict. And they have predicted that we're going to see outbreaks like this with increasing frequency. And so we have to be prepared. And we have to do all the external things, the masking, the social distancing, all of that, that's important. But we have to do the internal things too, to make sure that we are the healthiest hosts that we can be. Because all the things I mentioned to you, these aren't just things that keep us safe from things like SARS-CoV-2. They also keep us safe from all the diseases we talked about, the heart disease, the metabolic disease, etc. So these are the kinds of things I counsel patients about. They come in, oh, you're the microbiome lady. You're going to pull out some magic probiotic and wave this wand and we're going to be fixed. No. You're going to eat a lot of vegetables is what you're going to do. So eating more plant fiber, and I have a couple little tricks with my patients. I talk about the 1-2-3 rule. 1 vegetable at breakfast, 2 at lunch, 3 at dinner. So they're like, a vegetable at breakfast? Oh, they're scratching their head. I'm going to eat a vegetable at breakfast. I'm like, I don't care what you're eating for breakfast. Grab a carrot on your way out. Or if you're having some scrambled eggs, add some spinach to it. 1 vegetable at breakfast, 2 at lunch. It's easy if you're doing a salad, 3 at dinner. And when you do that, you're eating 6 servings of vegetables a day. In 5 days, you've got 30 vegetables. And that's just the vegetables. Remember, with the plants, it's fruits, nuts, seeds, all of it. But you gotta keep track of what you're doing. So eat more plant fiber, because plant fiber is prebiotic, fermented by the probiotics to the short-chain fatty acids. And guess what? You can't get the same effect from taking a short-chain fatty acid supplement. It doesn't work that way. You've gotta actually feed the bugs. So eat more plant fiber. Judicious use of antibiotics. Antibiotics have saved millions of lives. They are arguably the greatest medical invention in the last century, but there's no question now we're overusing them, we're not being good stewards. So in addition to the emergence of resistant superbugs that threaten to plunge us back into the dark ages before we had any antibiotics at all, and we're heading there, we also need to be mindful of what they're doing to our microbiome. Immunosuppressive drugs, the same. We need to avoid them when we can. Don't block stomach acid. Eat earlier, eat less fat, do what you need to do, figure it out, elevate the head of your bed, hold on to that stomach acid, it's protecting you. Beware of NSAIDs. I'm as guilty as the next. I have 57-year-old knees, they really hurt when I run long distances. I'm sure many of you in the audience can help me with that. But in the meantime, I've been guilty of taking an NSAID or 2, and like you, these drugs are magic. They take away the pain, they're fantastic, but they're compromising that intestinal lining. That, remember, is the only thing between you and the environment keeping you safe. Keep your mucus flowing. The American Pediatric Association now recommends that kids not be given cough suppressants, etc., things to stop the mucus. And the same is true for adults, because that mucus is protecting you. Stay hydrated and get outside. So one of the things I just want to draw your attention to is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these things involve trying to convince people to not take these drugs unless they really have to. And that really, in my gastroenterology practice, I spent a lot of time trying to undo the damage that a lot of these drugs do. So don't get me wrong, I'm glad we have them, but we have to realize that there is a price that we're paying when we're using them all the time. So I just want to leave you with this beautiful little movie here. Of what we're seeing is we're seeing that our external habitat is disappearing. And just as our external habitat in the world is disappearing, we've lost 80% of the world's forests, 60% of the oceans. We're seeing a species die off that's 1,000 times faster than what we should be seeing. We are seeing the exact same thing in our gut. We're seeing climate change, essentially, in our gut. Species die off. We have 2/3 of the bacterial species and far less diversity than many of our brothers and sisters living in the Amazon, or you look at the Hansa tribe in Tanzania, and of course those in the Amazon are at risk now too, because their habitat is disappearing. So regardless of how you feel about climate change, we are having a die-off, a species die-off in our gut. And it is not something that we can address by going to the pharmacy and buying a probiotic. That's magical thinking. We have to address it, really taking a hard look at the things that we're doing and that our patients are doing on a daily basis. The medications, the food, etc., the lack of exposure to nature. Because after your mom, as you make that prophetic journey through the birth canal and swallow a mouthful of her microbes, after that, we primarily get our microbes from the soil. So we have to think about exposure to nature. Obviously not this weekend, but when we get back to the real world, how we have to get outside, etc. if we want to have a healthy microbiome. And so my main recommendation for how to rewild yourself: limit medication, be as judicious with it as possible, expose yourself to some soil, and eat more fiber or dark sweat veg.